Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, dear guests, we continue with our series of Seerah lectures. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Today is the second one. It's a very important topic to understand for us. Many things even going on today, and that is rule and government among the Arabs before Islam. So we will just finish off a little bit of the introduction that we left off last time. As you know, we're going through the sealed nectar, Al-Rahiq al-Makhtum, which is the biography of the noble prophet by Sheikh Safiur Rahman al-Mubarak Furi, rahimahullah ta'ala. May Allah have mercy on him. We stopped, for those of you who are following by the book, which is published by Darus Salam, that's the one I'm doing. It's page 25, almost in the middle, a little bit down or lower than the middle. We stopped at the descendants of Qaidar or Qidar, the son of Ismail alayhi salam, lived long in Mecca, increasing in number, and from them came Adnan and his son Ma'ad. Some words I will be replacing. Why? Because I believe that the translation of some words are very difficult for English-speaking people to understand, especially for some who learned English not as their native tongue or native language. So of them came Adnan and his son Ma'ad, to whom Adnanian Arabs traced their ancestry. Adnan is the 21st grandfather in the series of the prophetic ancestry, alayhi salam, and this is what the scholars say is the authentic ancestry and the tree of the Prophet alayhi salam up to Adnan. It was said that whenever Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam spoke of his ancestry, he would stop at Adnan and say, genealogists tell lies, and didn't go further than him. I'm not sure this hadith, I believe, is not really authentic, but in any case, the scholars generally stop at Adnan because they say beyond him, it's not really possible to ascertain the authenticity of the ancestry of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But of course, for sure, he comes from Ismail alayhi salam, whose grandson, you can say, or great grandson Adnan, was from that line. A group of scholars, however, favored the probability of going beyond Adnan, considering the aforementioned hadith to be unauthentic, like I said. They went on to say that there were exactly 40 fathers between Adnan and Ibrahim alayhi salam. Nizar, Ma'ad's only son, had 4 sons who branched out into 4 great tribes, Iyad, Anmar, Rabi'a, and Mudar. I say this in Arabic pronunciation, of course, which I advise everyone to do because we should try and learn Arabic as much as possible, even the pronunciations of names. These last 2, meaning Rabi'a and Mudar, sub-branched into several other tribes. Rabi'a fathered Asad, Anaza, Abdul Qais, and Wa'il's 2 sons, Bakr and Taghlib. Of course, all these became great, huge tribes, Hanifa and many others. Mudar tribes branched out into 2 great divisions, Qais Aylan bin Mudar and tribes of Ilyas bin Mudar. From Qais Aylan came Banu Sulaim, Banu Hawazin. Banu means the children of in Arabic. And Banu Ghatafan, of whom descended Abs, Lubyan, Ashtah, and Ghani bin A'sur. From Ilyas bin Mudar came Tamim bin Murrah, Hudayl bin Mudrika, Banu Asad bin Khuzayma, and the tribe of Kinana bin Khuzayma, of whom came Quraysh, the descendants of Fihr bin Malik bin An-Nadr bin Kinana. Quraysh branched out into various tribes, the most famous of whom were Jumah, Sahm, Adi, Makhzum, Taym, Zuhra, and the tribes of Qusay bin Kilab, consisting of Abduddar bin Qusay, Asad bin Abdul Uzza bin Qusay, and Abd Manaf bin Qusay. This is very important. Why? Because we can then trace the tree of our Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, starting from all those people. There were 4 divisions of the tribe of Abd Manaf: Abd Shams, Nawfal, Muttalib, and Hashim. It is, however, from the family of Hashim that Allah selected the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam bin Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim. Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam said, إن الله اصطفى من ولد إبراهيم إسماعيل واصطفى من ولد إسماعيل كنانة واصطفى من بني كنانة قريشا واصطفى من قريش بني هاشم واصطفاني من بني هاشم, which means in English, Allah selected Ismail from the sons of Ibrahim, Kinana from the sons of Ismail, Quraysh from the sons of Kinana, Hashim from the sons of Quraysh, and he selected me from the sons of Hashim. Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib quoted Allah's Prophet ﷺ as saying, إن الله خلق الخلق فجعلني من خيرهم من خير فرقهم وخير الفريقين ثم تخير القبائل فجعلني من خير القبيلة ثم تخير البيوت فجعلني من خير بيوتهم فأنا خيرهم نفسا وخيرهم بيتا, which means Allah created the creatures and made me among the best of them. He chose the tribes and selected me from the best whereof, or thereof, better. And he chose families and made me among the best of them. Then he chose the households, making me among the best of their households. I'm the best of them in person and the best of them in household. Having increased in number, children of Adnan spread out over Arabia in pursuit of pastures and water. Abdul Qais, together with some tribes of Bakr bin Wa'il and Tamim, emigrated to Bahrain. Banu Hanifa bin Sa'ab bin Ali bin Bakr went to settle in Hajr, the capital of Yamama. All the tribes of Bakr bin Wa'il lived in an area of land that included Yamama, Bahrain, Sif, Kazima, the seashore. It says here Saif Kazima, but I think Sif, because in Arabic the seashore is called Sif. This is just for you to know. Sif Kazima, the seashore, the outer borders of Iraq, Ubulla and Khit. Most of the tribe of Taghlib lived in the Euphrates area, while some of them lived with Bakr. Banu Tamim lived in the desert of Basra, Banu Sulaym in the vicinity of Medina on the land stretching from Wadi al-Qura to Khaybar onwards to Harra. Thaqif dwelled in Ta'if and Hawazin east of Mecca near Awtas en route from Mecca to Basra. Banu Asad lived on the land east of Tayma and west of Kufa, while family of Tay', meaning the tribe of Tay' or families of Tay', lived between Banu Asad and Tayma. They were a 5-day travel. Here it says walk, but travel, because not necessarily did they walk. They obviously used camels, horses, and so on. They were a 5-day travel far from Kufa. Dubian inhabited the area between Tayma and Hawran. Some divisions of Kinana lived in Tihama, while some of the Quraysh dwelt in Mecca and its suburbs. The Quraysh remained completely disunited until Qusay bin Kilab managed to rally their ranks on honorable terms, attaching major prominence to their status and importance. This is here where we stop. And this all, if you can't remember, just open a map, any map, and try to visualize the Arab countries as they are now, and you will be able to see what we will be talking about just now and what we've just mentioned from the book of the Shaykh Rahimahullah before that. So now we go to rule and government among the Arabs. We have rule in Yemen, rule in Sham, which here they called Syria, translated like that, and in other areas, in Hira, which is you can say Iraq and what is now Iran, and in other areas, because if we look through Pan-Arabia among the Arab tribes and the political situation, the very last topic. So the Sheikh said, Rahimullah, when talking about the Arabs before Islam, we see that it's necessary to outline, or it's better to say we see it necessary, to outline the history of rule, government, sectarianism, and the religious domination of the Arabs, to facilitate the understanding of the emergent circumstances when Islam appeared. When the sun of Islam rose, rulers of Arabia were of two kinds: crowned kings, you can maybe say official kings, who were in fact not independent, meaning they depended on other people above them from the great empires, and heads of tribes and clans who enjoyed the same authorities and privileges possessed by crowned kings and were mostly independent, though some of them may have shown some kind of submission to a crowned king. The crowned kings were those of Yemen and those of geographical Syria, which in Arabic is called Sham, actually, because Syria, when we say it's a very small, or you can not say really very small, but it's a part of Sham. Sham in Arabic means what is present-day Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, northern parts of Saudi Arabia, and some parts of Iraq. So all of that is Sham. The family of Ghassan, the monarchy of Hira. All other rulers of Arabia were non-crowned. So here we look at the rule in Yemen, because Yemen is a very important area for us. In Yemen, the people of Sheba and Saba, of course, we have a surah in the Quran called Saba. In Arabic, Sheba is Saba. One of the oldest known nations of the pure Arabs. Mention has been made of them as early as the 25th century before Christ. So 2,500 years before Christ. So imagine that is more than 4,500 years ago. According to excavations undertaken in Ur, their civilization flourished and their domain spread in the 11th century before Christ, BC. It's possible to divide their ages to the following estimation. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 periods that has been mentioned here. The first one from 1300 to 650 BC. Their nation was known as Ma'iniya in Arabic, during which their kings were called Makrib Saba or Makrib Sheba. Their capital was Sarwah, also known as Khurayba or Khariba. They put it here, Khariba. In Arabic, it looks like Khurayba, whose ruins lie approximately 50 kilometers northwest of Ma'rib. Of course, anyone who knows the geography of Yemen knows that the city of Ma'rib exists until now, and 142 kilometers east of Sana'a, which is the present-day capital of Yemen. During this period, they began building the Dam of Ma'rib, which had great importance in the history of Yemen. Sheba had such great a domain, or so great a domain, that they had colonies inside and outside Arabia. That's the first period. The second is from 620 BC to 115 BC. During this era, their nation was known by the name of Sheba. They left the name Makrib and assumed the designations of the kings of Sheba. They also made Ma'rib their capital instead of Sarwah. The ruins of Ma'rib lie, meaning old Ma'rib, because now we have new Ma'rib, lie at a distance of 192 kilometers east of Sana'a. The third period is from 115 BC until 300 after Christ, or Christian era, you can say CE. During this period, the nation became known as Himyariya the First, after the tribe of Himyar. Of course, the tribe of Himyar until now exists in Yemen. After the tribe of Himyar conquered the kingdom of Saba or Sheba, making Raidan, here it says Ridan, but it's Raidan, their capital instead of Ma'rib. Later on, Raidan was called Zifar. Its ruins still lie in Mudawwar mountain near the town of Yarim. During this period, they began to decline and fall. Their trade failed to a great extent, firstly because of the Nabatean domain over northern Hijaz, secondly because of the Roman superiority over the naval trade routes after the Roman conquest of Egypt, Syria and northern Hijaz, and thirdly because of the intertribal warfare, which always weakens, of course, people. Because of the three above mentioned factors, the families of Qahtan remained disunited and scattered about. And the fourth period is from 300 Christian era until Islam dawned in Yemen. During this period, the nation was known as Himyariya II, and it witnessed increasing disorder and turmoil, followed by civil rebellion and outbreaks of tribal wars, rendering the people of Yemen liable to foreign subjugation, and hence loss of independence. During this era, the Romans conquered Aden, which in English is called Aden, of course, until now it exists, and even helped the Abyssinians, Ethiopians, to occupy Yemen for the first time in 340 CE, making use of the constant intra-tribal conflicts in Hamdan and Himyar. The Abyssinian Ethiopian occupation of Yemen lasted until 378 CE, after which Yemen regained its independence. Later on, cracks began to show in the Ma'rib Dam, which led to the Great Flood, mentioned in the Noble Quran. This was a great event which caused the fall of the entire Yemeni civilization and the dispersal of the nations living therein. In 523, Dhu Nawas, a Jew, dispatched a great campaign against the Christians of Najran in order to force them to convert to Judaism. Having refused to do so, they were thrown alive into a big ditch where a great fire was set, and the Quran referred to this event in Surah Uqutila Ashabul Ukhdud, when Allah said, "Cursed were the people of the ditch." This aroused great anger among the Christians and especially the Roman emperors, who not only instigated the Abyssinians, Ethiopians, against Arabs, but also assembled a large fleet of 70,000 warriors, which helped the Abyssinian army, the Ethiopian army, to effect a second conquest of Yemen in the year 525 under the leadership of Ariyat, in Arabic Ariyat. He was granted rulership over Yemen, a position he held until he was assassinated by one of his army leaders, Abraha, who after reconciliation with the king of Abyssinia took rulership over Yemen and later on deployed his soldiers to demolish the Kaaba, and hence he and his soldiers became to be known as Ashabul Fil, mentioned in the Quran, of course, the men of the elephant. In the year 575 CE, after the elephant incident, the people of Yemen, under the leadership of Ma'di Karib Saif bin Dhi Yazin al-Himyari, and through Persian assistance, this is the correct pronunciation of his name, Ma'di Karib Saif bin Dhi Yazin al-Himyari, and through Persian assistance revolted against the Ethiopian invaders, restored independence, and appointed Ma'di Karib as their king. However, Ma'di Karib was assassinated by some of his Ethiopian servants. The family of Dhu Yazin was thus deprived of royalty forever. Kisra, the Persian king, appointed a Persian ruler over Sana'a. Of course, now you can understand why there's so much conflict going on in Yemen and a lot of involvement from different countries. The family of Kisra, the Persian king, appointed the Persian ruler over Sana'a and thus made Yemen a Persian colony. Persian rulers maintained rulership of Yemen until Badhan, the last of them, embraced Islam in 638, thus terminating the Persian domain over Yemen. So rulership in Hira in English. Ever since a ruler called Korosh here, the Great, united the Persians, they ruled Iraq and its neighborhood. Nobody could shake their authority until Alexander the Great vanquished their king Dara the First, and thus subdued the Persians in 326. Persian lands were thenceforth divided and ruled by kings known as the kings of sects, an era that lasted until 230 of the Christian era. Meanwhile, the Qahtanians occupied some Iraqi territories and were later followed by some Adnanians who managed to share some parts of Mesopotamia with them. So this mostly Iraq, of course, we're talking about. The Persians, under the leadership of Ardashir, who had established the Sasanian state, in Arabic as Sasaniya, in 226 before Christ, or should be, I think, after, because AD normally we don't use in English. Why? Because AD means the year of our Lord, meaning the year of Jesus or after Jesus, and of course it's not correct that he's our Lord. Our Lord is Allah alone, and Isa alayhi salam is his messenger and prophet. In the year 226, I think, after Christ, or Christian era, regained enough unity and power to subdue the Arabs living in the vicinity of their kingdom, and forced the Quda'a tribe to leave for Syria or for Sham, leaving the people of Hira and Anbar under the Persian domain. Of course, you may have heard of the province of Anbar. It exists until now in Iraq, and it's one of the Sunnah areas in Iraq, the province of Anbar. During the time of Ardashir, Jazima al-Waddah exercised rulership over Hira and the rest of the Iraqi desert area, including Rabi'a and Mudar in Mesopotamia. Ardashir had reckoned that it was impossible for him to rule the Arabs directly and prevent them from attacking his borders unless he appointed one of them who enjoyed support and power of his tribe as a king. He had also seen that he could make use of them against the Byzantine kings, Roman kings, who always harassed him. At the same time, the Arabs of Iraq could face the Arabs of Syria, who were in the hold of the Roman kings. However, he deemed it fit to keep a Persian battalion under command of the king of Hira to be used against those Arabs in case they might rebel against him. After the death of Jazima and during the era of Kisra, Sabur bin Ardashir, Amr bin Adi bin Nasr al-Lakhmi, as you can see, the names are totally different from the Persian names, was ruler of Hira and Anbar. The Lakhmi kings remained in rule of Hira until the Persians appointed Qubaz bin Fayruz, in whose reign appeared someone called Mazdak, who called for loose manners in social life. Qubaz and many of his subjects embraced Mazdak's religion and even called upon the king of Hira, Al-Mundhir bin Ma'is Sama, that's how his name was, Al-Mundhir bin Ma'is Sama, to follow suit. When the latter, because of his pride and self-respect, rejected their call, Qubaz discharged him and nominated Harith bin Amr bin Hajar al-Kindi, who had accepted the Mazdak doctrine. No sooner did Kisra Anu Sharwan, this is a name, Anu Sharwan, succeed Qubaz than he, due to hatred of Mazdak's philosophy, killed Mazdak and many of his followers, restored Mundhir to the throne of Hira, and gave orders to summon under arrest Harith, who sought refuge with Al-Kalb tribe, where he spent the rest of his life. Sons of Mundhir bin Ma'is Sama maintained kingship a long time until An-Nu'man bin al-Mundhir took over. Because of a lie made up by Zayd bin Adi al-Abbadi, the Persian king got angry at An-Nu'man and summoned him to his palace. Nu'man went secretly to Hani bin Mas'ud, chief of Shayban tribe, and left his wealth and family under the latter's protection, and then presented himself before the Persian king, who immediately threw him into prison, where he remained until his death. Kisra then appointed Iyas bin Qabisa al-Ta'i as king of Hira. Iyas was ordered to tell Hani bin Mas'ud to deliver Nu'man's charge up to Kisra. No sooner had the Persian king received the fanatically motivated rejection on the part of the Arab chief than he declared war against the tribe of Shayban. He mobilized his troops and warriors under the leadership of King Iyas to a place called Ziqar, which witnessed a most furious battle where the Persians were severely routed by the Arabs for the first time in history. They say that this occurred very soon after the birth of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, 8 months after Iyas bin Qabisa's rise to power over Hira. After Iyas, a Persian ruler named Azadaba was appointed over, or Azadaba. In Arabic it's written Azadaba, or Azadba. Was appointed over Hira, ruling for 17 years, after which the authority returned to the family of Lakhm when Al-Mundhir bin al-Ma'rur took over. Hardly had the latter's reign lasted for 8 months when Khalid bin al-Walid fell upon him with Muslim soldiers. So this is in terms of Iraq, because Hira you can say is Iraq. The rulership in Sham. Here it says geographical Syria, but I would prefer to call it Ash-Sham, because in the Arabic version it says Ash-Sham. During the tribal immigrations, some branches of the Quda'a tribe reached the borders of Ash-Sham, where they settled down. They belonged to the family of Sulayh bin Halwan, of whose offspring were the sons of Daj'am bin Sulayh, known as Ad-Daja'ima. The tribes of Quda'a were used by the Romans in the defense of the Roman borders against both Arab Bedouin raiders and the Persians. A king was put in charge of them. One of the most famous kings was Ziyad bin al-Habula. They enjoyed autonomy for a considerable phase of time that lasted from the beginning of the 1st century to near the end of the 2nd century CE. Their authority, however, ended upon defeat by the, in Arabic, Ghassasina, the Ghassanites, who were consequently granted the proxy rulership over the Arabs of Sham and had not Dawmat al-Jandal but Busra, which not Basra in Iraq but Busra in Sham, as their headquarters, which lasted until the Battle of Yarmouk in the year 13 after Hijrah. Their last king, Jabal bin al-Ayham, embraced Islam during the reign of Amir al-Mu'minin Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Now we turn our attention to the rulership in Hijaz before Islam. Hijaz, of course, Makkah, Medina, and whatever is in between. Ismail alayhi administered authority over Mecca as well as custodianship of the Kaaba throughout his lifetime. Upon his death at the age of, they say, 137 years, two of his sons succeeded him, Nabit, then Qaidar. Here it says Qidar. They also say the opposite in order, meaning first Qaidar, then Nabit. Later on, their maternal grandfather, Mudad bin Amr al-Jurhumi, took over, thus transferring rulership over Mecca to the tribe of Jurhum, preserving a venerable position. Very little authority remained for Ismail's sons, even though they held a sacred status, since it was their father who built the Kaaba. Time passed without the case of the children of Ismail changing until the rule of Jurhum declined prior to the invasion of Bukhtanasar. The political role of the Adnanides had begun to gain firmer grounds in Mecca, which could be clearly attested to by the fact that upon Bukhtanasar's first invasion of the Arabs in that Irq, the leader of the Arabs was from the Adnanides, not from Jurhum. Upon Bukhtanasar's second invasion in 587 BC, however, the Adnanites were frightened out to Yemen, while the Israelite proclaimed prophet Burkhia fled to Syria from Harran with Ma'ad. But when Bukhtanasar his pressure lessened, Ma'ad returned to Mecca to find none of the tribe of Jurhum except Jusham, or Jursham here it says, bin Julhuma, whose daughter Mu'ana was given to Ma'ad as wife. She later had a son by him called Nizar. On account of difficult living conditions and poverty prevalent in Mecca, the tribe of Jurhum became to treat visitors of Kaaba poorly and obtained by force its funds, meaning removed the treasures of Al-Kaaba that were in it, because there were lots of gold and things like this. That aroused resentment and hatred of the tribes of Adnan, sons of Bakr bin Abd Manaf bin Kinana. They, with the help of the tribe of Khuza'a that had come to settle in a neighboring area called Marr al-Dhahran, invaded Jurhum and frightened them out of Mecca. Rulership was left to Quda'a in the middle of the 2nd century Christian era. So this is what happened about maybe 400 or so years before the start of the prophethood of Muhammad alayhi salam. Upon leaving Mecca, the tribe of Jurhum filled up the well of Zamzam, meaning basically blocked it with sand and things like this, leveled its place and buried a great many things in it. Amr bin al-Harith bin Mudad al-Jurhumi was reported by Ibn Ishaq to have buried the 2 gold diya of Al-Kaaba together with the black stone in the Zamzam well, and after sealing it up, he and those with him escaped to Yemen. Ismail's period is estimated to have lasted for 20 centuries BC. It means that, before Christ meaning, it means that Jurhum stayed in Mecca for 21 centuries, so 2,100 years, and held rulership there for about 20 centuries. So very long time they were ruling. Upon defeat of Jurhum, the tribe of Khuza'a monopolized rulership over Mecca. Mudar tribes, however, enjoyed 3 privileges. The first of them was leading pilgrims from Arafat to Muzdalifah and during the rites at Mina on the day of sacrifice. This was the authority of the family of Al-Ghawth bin Murrah, descendants of Ilyas bin Mudar, who were called Sufa. This privilege meant that the pilgrims were not allowed to throw stones at Al-Aqaba until one of the Sufa men did that. When they finished stoning and wanted to leave the valley of Mina, Sufa men stood on the 2 sides of Aqaba and nobody would pass that position until the men of Sufa passed and cleared the way for the pilgrims. When the Sufa perished, the family of Sa'd bin Zayd Manat from the Tamim tribe inherited this responsibility. So the second privilege of the Mudar tribes was what we call in Arabic al-Ifada, leaving for Mina after Muzdalifah on sacrifice morning, or meaning on the morning of the day of sacrifice, and this was the responsibility of the family of Adwan. The third privilege was the postponement of the sacred months, and of course this was a great sin mentioned by Allah in the Quran, that sometimes they used to postpone the sacred months when they wanted to fight, for example, to wage wars, and then they would reinstate it in other months. And this was the responsibility of the family of Tamim bin Adi from Banu Kinana. Khuza'a's reign in Mecca lasted for 300 years, during which the Adnan tribes spread all over Najd and the sides of Bahrain and Iraq, while small branches of the Quraysh remained on the sides of Mecca. They were Hulul, Sirm, Hulul, not Halul, Hulul, Sirm, that's in Arabic, and some other families of Kinana. They enjoyed no privileges over Mecca or the sacred house until the appearance of Qusay ibn Kilab, whose father is said to have died when he was still a baby, and whose mother subsequently married Rabi'a bin Haram from the tribe of Banu Udhra. Rabi'a took his wife and her baby to his homeland on the borders of Sham. When Qusay became a young man, he returned to Mecca, which was ruled by Hulayl bin Habsha from Khuza'a, Hulayl bin Habsha from Khuza'a, who gave Qusay his daughter Hubba as wife. After Hulayl's death, a war between the Khuza'a and Quraysh tribes broke out, resulting in Qusay taking hold of Mecca and the sacred house. So the reasons of this war have been illustrated in three versions, meaning three reasons, you can say, maybe. Don't worry, inshallah, not much left. I know it may be a little bit difficult to follow this, but it should be really interesting, barring, of course, my boring voice, but the content should be really interesting for anyone who is interested in the history of the Arabs. So the reasons of this war between Khuza'a and Quraysh have been illustrated in three versions. The first, having noticed the spread of his offspring, increase of his property, and rising of his honor after Hulayl's death, Qusay found himself more entitled than the tribes of Khuza'a and Banu Bakr to shoulder the responsibility of rulership over Mecca and custodianship of the Kaaba. He also advocated that Quraysh were the chiefs of Ismail's descendants. He consulted Quraysh and Kinana to expel Khuza'a and Banu Bakr from Mecca, and they supported him. The second version of this conflict, or the reason of this conflict, is that the Khuza'a claimed or you can say the tribe of Khuza'a claimed that Hulayl requested Qusay to hold custodianship of Kaaba and rulership over Mecca after his death. The third version is that Hulayl gave the right of Kaaba service to his daughter Hubba and appointed Abu Ghubsha al-Khuza'i to function as her agent of that. Upon Hulayl's death, Qusay brought this right for a leather bag of wine, which aroused dissatisfaction among the men of Khuza'a, and they tried to keep the custodianship of the sacred house away from Qusay. The latter, meaning Qusay, however, with the help of Quraysh and Kinana, managed to take over and even expel Khuza'a completely from Mecca. Whatever the truth might have been out of these three versions, maybe all of them might have been, or whatever can be agreed, the whole affair resulted in the deprivation of Sufa of their privileges previously mentioned, evacuation of Khuza'a and Bakr from Mecca, and transfer of rulership over Mecca and custodianship of the holy sanctuary, meaning the Haram, to Qusay. After fierce wars between Qusay and Khuza'a inflicting heavy casualties on both sides, reconciliation and then arbitration of Ya'mur bin Auf from the tribe of Bakr, whose judgment entailed eligibility of Qusay's rulership over Mecca and custodianship of Kaaba. Qusay's irresponsibility, meaning he's not really responsible for Khuza'a's losses, bloodshed, and imposition of diya or blood money on Khuza'a and Banu Bakr. Qusay's reign over Mecca and the sacred house began in the year 440 CE and allowed him and Quraysh after him absolute rulership over Mecca and undisputed custodianship of the sacred house, to which Arabs from all over Arabia came to pay homage. Qusay brought his kinspeople to Mecca, meaning his relatives, and allocated it to them, allowing Quraysh some dwellings there. Nusa'a in Arabic. Nusa'a, the families of Safwan, Adwan, Murra bin Auf, preserved the same rights they used to enjoy before his arrival. A significant achievement credited to Qusay was the establishment of Darun Nadwa, or Nadwa House, an assembly house on the northern side of the Kaaba to serve as a meeting place for the Quraysh. This was very beneficial for the Quraysh because it secured unity of opinions among them and cordial solutions to their problems. Qusay enjoyed the following privileges of leadership and honor. Presiding over Darun Nadwa meetings, the consultations relating to serious issues were conducted there, and marriage contracts were announced. The war standard, meaning the flag of war, there could be no declaration of war except with his approval or the approval of one of his sons. And also he was the caravan leader, he was the commander of all the caravans. No caravan from Mecca could depart, be it for trade or otherwise, except under his authority or the authority of one of his sons. He was also the doorkeeper of the Kaaba. He was the only one eligible to open its gate and was responsible for its service and protection. Also, he enjoyed providing water for the pilgrims. They would fill basins sweetened by dates. Basins meaning in Arabic, it's hawd. It's like a huge body of water, sweetened by dates or raisins for the pilgrims visiting Mecca to drink. And also feeding the Hujjaj, the pilgrims. This meant making food for pilgrims who could not afford it, like for guests, not like for, some low quality food, but it was diyafa. It says diyafa, for diyafa, for honoring the guest. Qusay even imposed on Quraysh annual land tax for food paid at the season of the Hajj pilgrimage. It's noteworthy, however, that Qusay singled out Abd Manaf and son of his for honor and prestige, though he was not his elder son, Abd Dar was, and entrusted him with such responsibilities as chairing Darun Nadwa, the standard, meaning the flag, the doorkeeping of the Kaaba, providing water and food for the Hujjaj pilgrims. Due to the fact that Qusay's deeds were regarded as unquestionable and his orders inviolable, his death gave no rise to conflicts among his sons, but later it did among his grandchildren. For no sooner had Abd Manaf died than his sons began to have rows with their cousins, sons of Abd Dar. Of course, as you know, Abd Dar was the oldest of the children of Qusay, which would have given rise to conflict and fighting among the whole tribe of Quraysh had it not been for a peace treaty that they themselves initiated. It's very important when making peace that all the sides agree to it. Thereby, posts were reallocated to preserve feeding and providing water for pilgrims for the sons of Abd Manaf, while Darun Nadwa, Nadwa House, the flag and the doorkeeping of Kaaba were maintained for the sons of Abd Dar. So they divided these privileges. The sons of Abd Manaf, however, cast the lot for their charge. Consequently, they left the job of giving food and water to Hashim bin Abd Manaf, upon whose death this charge was taken over by a brother of his called Al-Muttalib bin Abd Manaf. After him, it was to be taken by Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim, the Prophet's grandfather, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His sons assumed this position until the rise of Islam, during which Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib was in charge. Of course, you know Abbas is the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of his uncles who embraced Islam, and he is the father of Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhum. Many other posts were distributed among people of Quraysh for establishing the pillars of a new democratic minor state with government offices and councils similar to those of today. Enlisted as follows are some of these posts. Like casting the lots for the idols was as allocated to Banu Jumah. Casting lots, deciding things, noting of offers and sacrifices, settlement of disputes and relevant issues were to lie in the hands of Banu Sam. Consultation was to go to Banu Asad. Organization of blood money and fines was with Banu Taym. bearing the national banner, was with Banu Umayyah. The military institute, footmen and cavalry would be Banu Makhzum's responsibility. Banu Adi would function as foreign ambassadors. As you see, they distributed very important things between the tribes so that not to make war on the basis of these issues. And of course, the fact that they had peace was very important in whatever came later. Last two little things here before we finish, and we will finish with them inshallah. Rulership in Pan-Arabia among the older Arabs. And the Shaykh Rahimahullah said, we have previously mentioned that the Qahtani and Adnan emigrations and division of Arabia between these two tribes. Those tribes dwelling near Hira were subordinate, as we said, Hira is mostly Iraq, were subordinate to the Arabian king of Hira, while those dwelling in the deserts of Sham were under the domain of the Ghassasina, the kings of the tribe of Ghassan. A sort of dependency that was in reality formal rather than actual. However, those living in the far-off desert areas enjoyed full autonomy. Why? Because no one really bothered to try and conquer or control those living in the desert, because how difficult it was to get there actually, and to get back alive even. These tribes in fact had heads chosen by the whole tribe, which was a demi-government based on tribal solidarity and collective interests in defense of land and property. Heads of tribes enjoyed dictatorial privileges similar to those of kings, and were rendered, or were given, you can say, full obedience and subordination in both war and peace. Rivalry among cousins for rulership, however, often drove them to outdo one another in entertaining guests, affecting generosity, wisdom, and chivalry for the sole purpose of outranking their rivals, and gaining fame among people, especially poets, who were the official spokesmen at the time. Of course, poets at that time especially had huge influence. Head of tribe and master had special claims to spoils of war, such as 1/4 of the spoils, whatever he chose for himself, or found on his way back, or even the remaining indivisible spoil. So this is the very small part in terms of the rulership among the other Arab areas. The political situation, this is the last topic for today. The three Arab regions adjacent to foreigners suffered great weakness and inferiority. The people there were either masters or slaves, rulers or subordinates. Masters, especially the foreigners, had claim to every advantage. Slaves had nothing but responsibilities to shoulder. In other words, absolute rulership brought about violation of the rights of subordinates, ignorance, oppression, iniquity, injustice, and hardship, turning them into people groping in darkness and ignorance. So fertile land rendered its fruits to the rulers and men of power to extravagantly spend on their pleasures and enjoyments, wishes and desires, oppression and aggression. The tribes living near these regions or moving between Syria and Iraq, whereas those living inside Arabia were disunited and governed by tribal conflicts and racial and religious disputes. They had neither a king to maintain their independence, nor a supporter to seek advice from or depend upon in hardships. The rulers of Hijaz, however, were greatly esteemed and respected by the Arabs, and were considered as rulers and servants of the religious center. Rulership of Hijaz was in fact a mixture of secular and official superiority, as well as religious leadership. They ruled among the Arabs in the name of religious leadership, and always monopolized the custodianship of the holy sanctuary and its neighborhood. They looked after the interests of the Kaaba visitors and were in charge of putting Ibrahim's ﷺ code into effect. They even had such offices and departments like those of the parliaments of today. However, they were too weak to carry the heavy burden, as this evidently came to light during the Ethiopian invasion. Inshallah, next time we will have the religions of the Arabs, which should be very interesting. I stop here, and if you have any questions, you're very welcome if I can answer them. If not, then we bid farewell to one another. Stay safe, and may Allah protect you and reward you for your patience. Jazakumullahu khairah.
Assalamu alaikum. We have a question on the screen.
Yes, yes, brother.
They're asking what books are beneficial to read in order to learn more about the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
What books to read in order, what beneficial books or what books will be beneficial to read in order to learn more about the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, for the English-speaking reader, it differs greatly from the Arabic-speaking reader. For the English-speaking reader, as far as I know, The Sealed Nectar is the best book. There are other books, maybe possibly I myself, I'm not aware of them, because he collected a lot of information from a huge number of sources to make it into the book that was, firstly, of course, in Arabic, then it was translated. However, I encourage everyone to learn Arabic. It's not as difficult as it may seem. If you have a good teacher, experienced teacher, and you stick with him, in a few years, if you work hard, you'll be able to read Arabic books, and that opens up to you a huge amount of information which you can read. And of course, after that, you'll be able to read much more literature and have access to much more literature. So that's the answer. Okay, how can one explain what the Orientalists and those that propagate against Islam, the issue concerning the satanic verses? To be honest, brother Mizan Abu Isa, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of I didn't really read, if you refer to the book entitled Satanic Verses, I'm not sure really what it is about. But if it's about the Quran, then and you have to be Majnoon really Majnoon meaning mad, to read Quran, for example, in its original or even the translation and call them that. It's totally unacceptable. Orientalists, they really exist in order to fight Islam. You have to be in no doubt. So what they mean, they should explain. I don't know, because they study Islam in order to actually put Muslims into fitna, into doubts about their own religion. So if you qualify your question a little bit more, maybe I can answer a little bit more. So yes. Okay, I heard that Yasir Qadi has done a detailed Sira talks. Do you think I would listen to Yasir Qadi's Sira talks? To be honest, I don't know what talks they are, and I don't know this person well at all. I don't really advise to listen to people that you don't know. I mean, I don't know him to be, and I don't know. I mean, I can't really advise to listen to someone that is unknown in terms of Sira knowledge and things like this. But I don't know if we might have some brothers who have done some talks, maybe some of our brothers in the UK or in America who are known to be on the Sunnah and the understanding of the Salaf. That would be beneficial. Mm.
That's all our questions for today.